I'm just going to kind of go through this a little bit and read a little bit and comment on it. This, as I said, is my favorite parable of Jesus. I talk a lot about the Jesus hermeneutic and about how Jesus came to tell us who God is. And if there is one thing in the Bible, one group of stories, one parable, I think that tells us really who is God. It is the parable of the lost son. This is one of the reasons why I think this is one of the most favorite parables of any in the Bible. Is because it's so easy to figure out. Even a child can figure it out. Maybe that's why I love it so much. It's easy to figure out. God is the Father, and you and me are the elder brother and the prodigal son. There's different ways to interpret this too. It's an easy one to interpret, but I'll get into a little bit of interpretation. Our more evangelical brothers and sisters might interpret it a little bit differently than I will for you this morning. But let's kind of take a look at this. A man had 2 sons, and the younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now before you die." Kate, we have a slide. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but this is Rembrandt's rendering of the return of the prodigal son. We have one more. So we've got a family here, don't we? What are families? They're all happy, aren't they? They're always happy. When I have people come to see me in counseling, I used to think the same thing with me. How come everybody else's family is so intact? You look at the front of their house and you know that they're all happy in behind those doors, aren't they? Here's mom and here's dad, and look at the kids, we're all huggy. What's really going on? Ah! Let me have one more. I just like this little girl's eyes. I thought they were fun. Let me have one more. Yeah. Not always like this, but families have problems, right? Look at this family. There's a man. He has 2 sons. The man is God. Any of you ever had that feeling? We spent our whole life raising you, and you run off with that no good so-and-so scoundrel. Here is God as the father, and God is the head of a dysfunctional family. It makes me feel a little bit better. I don't know about you. So here we have some family drama, don't we? And it reminds me when I was a child. I think I was 2 or 3 years old, and I had a friend named Haywood. I won't use his last name, but it doesn't really matter. But Haywood and I used to play in the sandbox together, and there's pictures my parents having me playing with Haywood, just talking about families and drama behind the doors of what looks like a comfortable and wonderful home. And I remember that one day my mom told me that I wasn't allowed to play with Haywood anymore. And I couldn't figure out why, and I guess they just didn't want to tell me. But Haywood had leukemia at 3 years old, and this was back in the late 60s, early 70s. And Haywood died, and I lost my friend. And I remember the house that used to look so warm and friendly that I would drive by had a look of sadness about that very exact same house. So we have a family that's splitting up here. The son is obviously, he's arrogant. He doesn't care about his father. He doesn't care about the rest of the family. And his father agreed to divide the wealth between his sons. And a few days later, the younger son packed his belongings and moved to a distant land. There he goes. He wants out. Now, I read this, and a lot of the interpretations are that he went over to this distant land and cavorted with prostitutes and all this sort of thing. I don't know why we do this, but we seem to have sex on the brain as soon as we begin to think of what is the big sin. But it really just says he goes and he spends his money prodigally. And then he becomes really, really hungry. Now, if you are a Jew 2,000 years ago, and in many Jewish communities today, feeding pigs are a filthy, filthy animal. So when Jesus is telling this story, people hearing it are saying, "Oh my God, pigs." Let me have one more. Not only is he tending to pigs, which is a filthy job. I don't know exactly how they think about it, but I come from Florida. Cockroaches to me are the filthiest, just make my skin crawl. One of the things I like about Idaho is I haven't seen one cockroach since I've been here. This is, if you've ever been in a 12-step program, this is called hitting rock bottom. When you are so hungry that you're tending to pigs and you want to eat the pig's food, this is what we call rock bottom. This is a place of powerlessness. So he is at rock bottom, and what does he say? Here's a critical point of the story. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home even the hired servants have food to spare, and I'm dying of hunger." A lot of our more evangelical brothers and sisters will say this is repentance. This is where when he changes his mind and he repents of his sin, this enables God to forgive him. I'm going to take a different tack, which is why I think it's the most wonderful parable in the Bible. Does it sound like repentance to you? At home the hired servants have food to spare. I will go home to my father and say, "Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant." This is what we call the rehearsal speech. To my mind, this is the younger son saying, "Okay, Dad's going to be really, really angry." And it's a rehearsal speech, I think. He's saying, what do I need to do? He knows his dad is a godly man. And so he's going to go home and he's going to tell his father what he thinks his father wants to hear. Any of you who have ever raised children, or if you've been a child, most of you I think have probably been a child, what is coming when your child says all of a sudden, "Hey, so I was thinking, money, car, curfew." He's rehearsing the speech, isn't he? So he returned to his father after rehearsing the speech. And here's one of the most loveliest lines in the entire Bible. So he returned home to his father. Caitlin, you have one more? Nope. Okay, Courtney forgot one. That's okay. Here it is. "And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him." This is you and I when we've done it wrong, which all of us have and all of us do and all of us will. And turning back towards God, we don't even get the chance to get back to God, because God comes running to us. God comes running to us before we are even able to make the full turn and come back. His son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and you, and I'm no longer blah, blah, blah." Father doesn't even hear it, does he? Father doesn't even hear it. The father has just run out there and humiliated himself. If you know patriarchal Jewish culture, a seminary professor of mine told this story to I think it was in Syria, to a group of men in a small village in Syria, and he read this parable to them. And they actually became very, very angry and agitated at this story, because no Jewish patriarch would ever run, have his robes flying and his legs bare. But that's what God just did here. The image I get is, can you imagine Queen Elizabeth in her crown and her robes all of a sudden running across the field or something? It's ridiculous. So the father doesn't even hear him, does he? He says, "Quick, bring the finest robe and kill the calf. We have to celebrate because he's come home." This reminds me, when I think of unconditional love, I have to go back to my father's mother, my grandmother. I called her Mama. We had 2 telephones in our house. One was upstairs, one was downstairs. And wherever my parents were, I would go to the other phone. And some of you may be old enough to remember this, but in those days you had the rotary thing, it was like 3, 8, 90825. I still remember her phone number. Mamaw. And I would call Mamaw and I would say, Mamaw, are you lonely? And Mamaw always said, Charlie, I'm so lonely. Oh, good, I come stay with you. And I would go tell my parents. And my parents would say, we told you not to do that. Mamaw and Papa need some time alone. She says she's lonely. And Mamaw would prop me up in my Papa's chair, put a blanket over me. She would cook me Clark burgers, which was, I guess, today's Bubba burger. And she would give me a bath and put me to bed. She never ever said that she wasn't lonely. This, to me, this part of the story, Quick Bring Road, we have to celebrate because of this child is home, reminds me of Mamaw. So then we're going to get into it. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house. And he asked one of the servants, what's going on? Your brother is back, he was told, and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because he is of his safe return. Not because he's repented, not because he's changed his mind, not because he apologized, not because he's going to pay the money back. God doesn't need your perfection. God doesn't need your worthiness. God just wants you at the party. God just wants you at the party. All throughout the New Testament, Jesus' description of the kingdom of heaven. Okay, give me some banquet slides. It's always a big banquet. It's a feast where everybody's getting together. It's a big banquet. This is Jesus' description of the kingdom of heaven on earth, is a banquet. And there's a division. Here's the kingdom of heaven for Jesus, the description. But the division is, who is willing to come to the banquet? We have people who are willing to come to the banquet, and then we have this elder son. And we all have some elder son in us. Some people are not willing to come to the banquet, Jesus tells us, because the guest list isn't quite right. I've worked so hard, I thought we were having steak and lobster. What's this fajitas and tacos? Why should I have to sit next to her? I was a lot better than she was. The older brother doesn't want to go to the banquet. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. Here's the slow burn. If you think about it, perhaps as much as 40% of the estate was given to the younger son. Land equals life. When land was traded at the village gates with the elders and the deeds were signed, there was great celebration on the side who just bought the land. And for people who sold the land, it was a day of sorrow. Generations had gone into, perhaps hundreds of years, and family history went into acquiring that land. And this older brother is thinking about that. I would probably be thinking about that. How about you? The older brother is the one that has prostitutes on the mind. Maybe because he's been on the farm for so long. So the slow burn. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him. But he replied, all these years I've slaved for you, and you never once refused to give me a single thing. You didn't even give me a young goat. Yet when this son of yours, does that remind you of anything that we talked about in the not too? It reminds me of Adam in the Garden of Eden when God busts him for eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What does Adam say? This woman you gave me, right? When this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you kill the fattened calf. God comes to him just like he came to the younger brother. The elder brother is just like all of us. And the younger brother is just like all of us. As I start to wrap this up, we all want unconditional love. And we all want forgiveness, like the younger brother. But we tally up, like the older brother, not just the sins and the mistakes of others around us, but we tally up those in ourselves. And we tell ourselves, I've done so many bad things, I'm not worthy. How can someone love me when I've done all these things? If everyone around me knew all the truth about the things that I have done, they wouldn't love me. And yet this is exactly what this story is telling us. Yes, despite all your mistakes and mine, God still comes running to you. We never know if the older brother joins the banquet or not. The story simply stops. The story simply stops. There's another whole sermon in here as we get to the end. His father said to him, look, son, you've always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day. Your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. It seems that one of the messages is that in order to be found, you have to get lost. In order to know the value of what you have lost, you have to lose it. To gain your life, you must lose it. A kernel of wheat will remain a kernel of wheat unless it dies and falls into the ground. There's a whole other message of this. As I wrap this up, we don't know if the elder brother joined the banquet or not. He never figured it out. And some of us never figure it out, or some of us have a hard time figuring it out. It's all a gift, your life. Your life is a gift. Despite your mistakes or unworthiness or anything else, it's a gift. Let me have another slide, Kate. This again is Rembrandt's rendering of the return of the prodigal son. Something I found interesting when I think about Mammon. God the Father, with a male hand and a female hand. God doesn't need your worthiness. God doesn't need your perfection. God doesn't even need your, let me have one more slide, okay? God doesn't even need your goodness, as this parable tells us. At the end, all God wants is for you to be at the party. Amen.